Marshall-Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany, and we are just 14 days from the election as I sit here with my co-hosts Emily Compagno and Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Leslie Marshall and Brian Kilmeade.
Yay.
Well, we begin, as you think where we begin, with the high-stakes midterm elections now 14 days from today. Candidates in some of the most closely watched races are facing off in their one and only debates. Like tonight, the Pennsylvania Senate matchup is in the spotlight. It's a race that could determine which party controls the Senate. Polls show only single digits separating John Fetterman and Dr. Mehmet Oz. And Fetterman's campaign is now trying to lower expectations about his performance tonight, reminding the media that he's recovering from a stroke and was never much of a debater even before that, and that he lacks his Republican rivals' experience in television. And Emily, Leslie, has very nicely laid out on the couch that criminal justice reform is separate and distinct from what Fetterman is doing. Fetterman on the parole board has voted more times than any other member to let people with life prison sentences out. That is very different than the First Step Act.
Mm-hmm. But here's the problem, okay? When you look at the polls, first of all, Fetterman is leading, and he's not leading within the margin. He's
single digits.
So, he's still leading by 6%. One. Two, I would agree with you on issues as far as that's what the campaign should be about. And I think the reason that look, I'm a Democratic strategist, not a Republican strategist, right? But if I were a Republican strategist, I would be telling Dr. Oz tonight to do exactly what Emily just said, because his popularity, his approval rating is not good. And this is a problem for him. And it's not just being an outsider, as many view him in the state of Pennsylvania. It's the personal attacks as a doctor on Fetterman's health. And like you said, that's not what people want.
But what about voting to let these murderers out? We've put up their pictures. We've told their stories. I mean, great. Do you think that's going to help him?
No. What I'm saying is he is 6% ahead, okay?
Single digits.
Single digits. Why? Because everybody's focusing on the personal attack. People aren't focusing on the issues that matter to the voters. But obviously, these issues don't matter perhaps as much, just like a debate doesn't matter as much. The people are pretty much set on who they're going to vote for. You know this. It's going to change, a vote or two. But tonight, there are going to be people that are going, oh, look, Fetterman's not fit, for office. He's going to read this. And then the people that love him are going to say, we have no problem with that. He's doing really good. He's going to be better. He'll be great by the time. Because this is the seat that could determine the balance of power in the Senate. So I don't think the debate, sadly, is going to matter tonight. And Fetterman did what is doing, in a sense, what Herschel Walker said, right? Herschel Walker said, look, I'm not as bright, I'm not as great at debates, etc.
President Biden putting a new spin on the issue driving voters to the polls this election cycle, the economy. Inflation has been a real problem for him. Prices have gone up dramatically on his watch. And the latest inflation numbers showing prices jumped by 8.2% year over year last month. But during an appearance at DNC headquarters yesterday, Biden claimed that it's the Democrats who are the fiscally responsible party and that Republicans will tank the economy. Watch.
We, the Democrats, are the ones that are fiscally responsible. Let's get that straight now, okay? And we're investing in all of America, reducing everyday costs while also lowering the deficit at the same time. Republicans are fiscally reckless, pushing tax cuts for the very wealthy that aren't paid for, and exploiting a deficit that is making inflation worse.
Leslie, his hyperbole is difficult to stomach when he calls Republicans fiscally reckless, when it is his party and his administration that has printed money and pumped money by the millions and billions into programs and feeders that have been wasted, fraudulently obtained, stolen, inefficiently distributed. And his policies continue to take tax dollars and just spread it around like it's butter. But I'll leave my hyperbole aside for the second with my next sentence, just to say, don't you agree it is the result of his policies, his administration's policies, that began that inflation spike that every American feels well before Putin invaded, well before the global crisis that we've seen that he keeps pointing to? It started with him.
No, I wouldn't say that, although I wouldn't agree with what the president said, that Democrats are more fiscally responsible. I think politicians aren't always fiscally responsible on both sides of the aisle. But I will say, I'm not a top economist, but the top economists I've interviewed from both sides or a nonpartisan have said, even though you have the American Rescue Plan, and even though you have infrastructure, which, by the way, was a bipartisan piece of legislation with a big price tag ticket as well, they say that the Democratic policies or the Biden administration policies are going to contribute to the inflation rate by a maximum of 2%. And the reason I say that is you can't just blame inflation on the Biden administration. You just have to look at facts. The facts are you got to look at the feds. There is certainly a global issue, and my party's not that powerful that they can affect an international inflation rate, an international economy. 3, Putin invading Ukraine and the war there certainly had an effect. Lingering economics from the pandemic certainly has an effect. And we have to go back once again to the feds. Our feds were slow. Our feds were slow and not aggressive enough to act with regard to inflation when they knew it was coming.
2 things. First of all, and look, David Asman, Fox Business, and I just talked in depth about this. The inflation rate was 1.4 when Biden inherited it from former President Trump. By November of that year, 21, it was 7.9. The war didn't start until February.
It's not just the war.
Okay. The war shouldn't even be a calculation then. It was cooking almost as high as what we have now at 8.1 or 2, which is a 40-year high, as it was in November of 2021. You cannot even fathom anything other than these policies getting us there because nothing else had taken hold yet.
I'm just looking at economists who are experts in money, and I am not,
to
that say
lockdowns and
it's not just Democratic
going out
policies.
and going under and all of that in the pandemic. But all Biden has said is how resilient we are as an economy. And he blames Russia, he blames all these other things. But when you look at it, you have to look at his spending. You have to.
Well, wait,
we
Harris,
did the first round because we had to.
Let me ask you, can you name one politician, left or right, that's ever said, economy's bad, it's on me?
Yes.
Nobody.
Bill
Nobody.
Clinton. He said, I feel your pain.
I feel your pain, it's not my fault.
Come on, you know that if Biden
Joe
said
Biden
the words,
said, I feel your pain.
I feel, and then he meant them. I feel what you're feeling. I know how you're feeling, and I want to make it better, and here's what I'm going to do. Instead, you know what they did? They touted a lie, and they put lipstick on that pig. They called it Inflation Reduction Act when it had nothing to do with reducing the inflation. It reduces the deficit, and that's a beautiful thing, but there's not a one-in-one match. CBO said it. We didn't get that score out on that Friday, though, before they rammed it through over the weekend when they passed this. Look, I could go on for hours like this. Let's just call it what it is. He's got to own it. He's got to own it, and he's got to say he's dedicated to owning it. I don't think you'll ever see a
and first of all, I don't think he should. And second, not just do I think, I know when you look at history, there has never been a president of the United States that stood up and said, my fault, my fault.
Senator Ted Cruz is now responding to the wild reception he got during his appearance on The View yesterday. Climate protesters were heckling him live on the air. Wow, yelling at the people in the audience who are yelling at you. A member of Cruz's staff even claims one of the hecklers was cussing out the senator. That got bleeped before making air in other parts of the country. The show then cut the commercial and the hecklers were ejected. Then today, Senator Cruz appeared on Fox and Friends and said that the ladies of The View seemed stunned about what went down during the commercial break. Leslie, what happened to when they go low, we go high?
Well, first of all, I want to say, and I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this, I think Ted Cruz has guts going on there. I give him props for going on there. But I also want to give Whoopi Goldberg props because, you know, technically, most of us would think as climate protesters as being left of center. And so the climate protesters are screaming at a few people on the panel who they would normally think are on their side, are like-minded, or vote the same way. And I lastly want to say, because I know we don't have a lot of time in this segment, you know, and I get in trouble for this too, I don't care if it's Women's March, Million Man March, climate protesters screaming at The View March. It doesn't move the needle or change the issue. What does is legislation. And how do you get the legislation? You vote for people. And historically, in midterm elections, my party, Democrats, don't show up to vote. I know we're seeing record numbers so far. We'll have to see if Democrats are the majority.
So I think it's fascinating. Leslie, you and I have known each other for a long time, and we often talk about far left in your party. They are the loudest. Did you hear them? They are definitely the loudest. But what you're saying is they don't move the needle. And Brian, you were nodding in agreement.
Climate activists, they're anti-Van Gogh, I guess. They're ruining great art. They're to the left of the left. They're heckling AOC. I don't know who they're winning over, but I'd love to travel with them as they get in their Chevy Vega and go fill up their car at $5 a gallon gasoline, and then see how much they want to cheer for climate change. And they're in delusion. I'd like to know who raised them, who educated them, because they're not in the real world.
Brian, they're driving a Prius. Come on, you know they're not going to the Greens Club.
No, not in California, because you can't plug that bad boy in if it gets hot outside.
There's growing concern for our children as the new Nations Report Card shows the COVID pandemic's devastating impact on students. And it was entirely predictable. In the largest education department analysis of test scores since the start of the pandemic, reading scores fell far enough to erase 3 decades of gains. And math scores saw their biggest drop ever among 4th and 8th grade students in nearly every state. Leslie, and it's the marginalized students, marginalized communities that were hurt the most. That's the saddest part.
That's right.
Always is. It is very sad. Listen, I have a 14 and 15-year-old now, and a couple of years ago, 2 years younger than that. And I remember being on Fox in my dining room and my kids screaming, "Mom, the internet's going out." So I want to talk about the damage and the therapy for the parents as well, not just the children. All joking aside, the children, definitely. My kids and so many kids suffered during that time. I saw grades go down for both my kids during that time. I do think it has lasting repercussions, but when I look at it, it wasn't just Democrats. It was governors and in red states and blue states that were saying, shut down, don't go to school.
A Maryland couple bought a home in an upscale suburb and were just days away from moving in. But squatters beat them to it. And now the group is refusing to leave the 5-bedroom home. The couple's realtor confronted the strangers occupying the home and tells Fox they were refusing to budge.
Yeah. My husband's Indian, and his family's from Hyderabad, India, and his grandfather's home there, we wanted to sell it, and we went in, and there were hundreds of squatters, and we ended up having to sell the home for pennies on the dollar because nobody would buy it, just to get rid of the house and to get rid of the squatters. And when I saw this story, the first thing I thought is, when did we become a third world country? I mean, we're not a third world nation, obviously, but you know, this is happening in Maryland, in the United States. It's crazy, and I'm glad you shared the laws because I didn't know what they were.
The laws are antiquated. If you hit the snooze button every morning, you're not alone. Hideously, a new study finds 6 in 10 people do it too. Women are 50% more likely to do it, according to this study, and research says, surprise, surprise, it's a habit most seen among night owls and people who apparently get their steps less during the day. They walk less. There you go. And the antidote, Leslie, would be eye mask, earplugs, I guess, and that's how you get through 601, 602, 603, 604.
Have you been in my house? Because I do sleep with an eye mask and earplugs because my husband snores, but I think we have the same husband because my husband doesn't hear me talking. The snooze. Yes, I hit the snooze button. Yeah, I hit the snooze button, but I run 30 minutes with my dog down a really steep hill and back every day, so I don't know about those steps.
That's amazing.
But yeah, I'm not a morning person, and then when it's time, I go let the games begin after I hit snooze a couple of times.
Hunger Games.